Well, when we got ready to start this show, I thought Georgia Tech would be undefeated. However, thanks NC State, that's not the case.
You are Locked On Georgia Tech, your daily podcast on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Georgia Tech. I'm your host, Caleb Johnson, taking this daily journey with me every day covering the Yellow Jackets is my co-host, Jarvis Davis. I want to start off by saying thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you download your podcast and wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Anything less than that, I wish you nothing but rush hour traffic whenever you drive downtown. Today's episode, though, is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Locked On Georgia Tech is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on the show, we're going to get into how far did Georgia Tech fall in the AP poll? And this is the last one that matters. Who's to blame for that defensive performance that we saw from the Yellow Jackets in Raleigh on Saturday? But first, I honestly can't believe, Jarvis, that this is the type of performance we witnessed from Georgia Tech on Saturday, man. I mean, did this surprise you at all with what we saw from the Yellow Jackets going up to Raleigh, taking on NC State, and just falling absolutely flat defensively?
You know what, man? Like, I was shocked, to be honest with you, because, before we started this podcast, checking out the games, trying to get a good feel for this team and what they bring to the table. And the thing that really stood out to me when it comes to Georgia Tech and a Brent Key coach team is the fact that these guys are disciplined. They don't beat themselves when it comes to, especially on the defense side of the football. Like they had some issues, stopping the run, obviously. And that was some of the thing that was kind of put on tape against the Syracuse Orange, excuse me. That was one of the things that they put on tape about as far as not being able to stop the run. But like, for the most part, this is a team that they don't miss tackles. They're gonna be right there in coverage when the quarterback throws the football, and if they do catch the ball, they're gonna make the tackle. And that did not happen. You had missed tackles. You had guys running wide open down the field, and I'm just like, man, I don't know who this team is, but going up against a team like the Wolfpack, who has a quarterback that, I don't know about you, man, CJ Bailey looks like an NFL prospect to me.
Yeah.
As 19 years old, at 6'6", and probably about 195 dripping wet on a good day. So, yeah, like when you talk about all those things coming together, saying, all right, we normally do these things pretty well, and you don't do those things, tackle well, make sure everybody know where they're supposed to be, and there's no guys out here leaking out a lot of the backfield or getting wide open like that. So yeah, when I finished watching this game, I was utterly shocked because I was not expecting that type of performance from this defense.
Yeah, I think the thing is, obviously, you come in and know that this is a 4-loss NC State team. This is Georgia Tech favored by 5.5 points. Okay, so clearly Vegas behind this whole idea that Georgia Tech is the better team. Also, if you had told me, Jarvis, before this game that at halftime you would have NC State team missing their top running back, Hollywood Smothers, who didn't play in this one at all. Mm-hmm. They didn't have their starting guards, that they didn't have Justin Jolly playing, that CJ Bailey would be limping around on one leg for an entire half of football. If you told me all those things before the game, I would have told you Georgia Tech was going to rout NC State. That's what it would have made sense to me to be, because of all of those things hindering NC State. And so, that's one of those, you always kind of laugh when the losing head coach gives the credit to, the opponent for the way they play. But no, seriously, credit to CJ Bailey, credit to the local product, the kid from Stockbridge High School, Duke Scott. Like, credit them and what they were able to do on the offensive side of the ball, because I would have thought that the team that had bent multiple times over the course of this season, you look at Wake Forest being one of those examples that really glares in my mind as you all really came close to letting this thing get away from you.
Right.
And yet it feels like Brent Key teams always have figured this thing out this season. I thought they would once again, but all of those things still hit the Yellow Jackets, and they could not overcome. I think injuries on the defensive side of the ball for Tech, certainly a problem. No Mari Harvey, no Jock Gilmore, Matthew Alexander, like all of those guys being out certainly played a factor in these things, but I think there's enough veteran leadership on that defensive side of the ball that I thought it was going to be more impactful, quite honestly.
Yeah, man. And that's the thing. Another thing, as far as what a Brent Key coach team means to me is, like, those guys got out physical too, man.
Yes.
Like, the defensive line, they weren't getting off blocks. I was trying to figure out who was on the field or who wasn't on the field, who was missing up front in the defensive line, because I go back to that Syracuse game the week prior. And even in the Duke game, the guys were getting off blocks, man. Jordan Vandenberg, like, he was just dominating out there in that Duke game. Like, that man made 3 straight plays on the goal line. Like, I just stymie that man, getting his hands on that offensive lineman, boom, and getting off the block and making the tackle, man. That's the type of stuff that I love. That's my heart right there. For those you don't know, I played defensive line in college. So anytime we talk about offensive line or defensive line, I'm going to get excited. So, but I wasn't excited for this game because those guys got absolutely manhandled. And when Duke Scott did get a tackle on him, he always fell forward. I was just like, man, that's not the type of stuff that a guy like Coach Key likes. He doesn't like that type of stuff. He even talked about it. You talking about turning +2 into +4 and +3 into +6 or 7 or 8. Like, those things start to add up as the game goes along. I'm talking about pushing the pile, and then next thing you know, Duke Scott later on in the game, he broke that bad boy out, and nobody was nowhere to be found. They couldn't catch him. So those are the type of things where you say, okay, all right, you got your starting running back that's out. So it's a reason why guys are backups in college and in the NFL, however, whatever level you want to put out there. But for them to allow a guy like Duke Scott to come in at home, 24 carries, 196 yards, averaging 8 yards a pop, man, that is unacceptable. When Brent Key looked at that stat in the post-game presser, man, the look on his face is almost like his soul left his body.
Yeah, 1 tackle for loss in the first half. Like, that was the part to me that, watching this game, starting off with, and I'll be up front, Jarvis, settling into this game with where I was watching it at, didn't think I was going to have to be like real super meticulous right out the gate. And then very quickly was like, oh no, hold on. I got to settle in and like focus here because Tech isn't stopping anybody.
Right.
Exactly. And then looking back after this game and kind of going through breakdown by breakdown and being like, oh, they had 1 tackle for loss of Duke Scott in that first half. It's like, yeah, this is where, North Carolina State set the tone and carried it through the rest of this game. And obviously that second half was certainly, a problem where playing from behind so much, Georgia Tech couldn't afford any mistakes. And they ultimately had some mistakes that they made. We'll get into, was this a loss? on head coach Brent Key, or was this more on defensive coordinator Blake Gideon? But first, we need to get into some very exciting news that we can tell you about with Game Time. College football is back, and I could be more excited, like seriously. I mean, we're in the deep midst of this thing, and even with a loss to Georgia Tech, there's a lot of exciting football to continue to watch. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there is nothing like it. But let's get real. Actually, getting tickets can feel like a battle more than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees. Yeah, the hidden fees really drive me nuts. Prices jumping at the checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is actually what you're going to pay. I've pulled up Game Time and just gone through a couple of taps, seen amazing deals, and this means getting to see your favorite teams, yes, like the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, for as low as $25. The app is super simple. You could see the exact view of where you're going to sit in Bobby Dodd Stadium before you buy the tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download Game Time today. All right, Jarvis. Look, was this on Brent Key or more on Blake Gideon, based on just how pathetic of a defensive performance that it was for the Yellow Jackets, where it felt like they couldn't stop anybody?
I mean, I partly put a little blame on Brent Key, but I'm gonna have to go with Blake Gideon on this one, because the way they started this game, just from a game plan standpoint, like, you have the tall 6'6" athletic guy, a guy who can run like a deer and he can throw that bad boy as well. It was just a lot of soft coverage, a lot of guys playing off. And like you mentioned, Jock Gilmore being out, I understand that one of your best corners is out, but you can't go into games with like that, because CJ Bailey just looks so comfortable. I've never seen a quarterback that play that comfortably, for all the games that I've watched of Georgia Tech this year. And that's not supposed to be the case. If you're down a man in your secondary, you have to challenge these wide receivers. You have to throw off the timing to give your defensive line time to get off the ball. I talked about defensive linemen not being able to get off the blocks. Those guys are, essential to helping out your cornerback. So you have to come with pressure. If they aren't getting there, you got to bring pressure and start playing some man coverage and disrupt the timing of this offense, because CJ Bailey, he didn't even have to think. It was just dink and dunk. And then if they were to get any type of pressure and force him to get outside the pocket, he wasn't even trying to run the football. He was trying to throw that bad boy. He was trying to get that bad boy down the field. And then next thing you know, you got guys leaking out, guys losing guys in coverage, and it just is not a good look. So when you think about it from that standpoint, I felt like from the beginning, it was Blake Gideon for me, because I felt like he was just a little bit too passive with his game plan. Understanding that you're dealing with injuries in that secondary. I get it. I understand that. But the style that you want to play with is aggressive. You want to, form tackling, putting guys on the ground. Like, that passivity that you play with, that game plan that you had, that's the thing that ultimately took you down, because you had guys out there missing tackles. You out there playing soft coverage. And then when they coming up to make tackles, they weren't able to do it. It was just too many factors in that game plan that I questioned, because when you think about it, you're going up against a team that you're supposed to beat. Like, you have to be aggressive. You have to be aggressive. You have to be aggressive with the conversations leading up to the game. And when you come in with that type of game plan and you get punched in the mouth in the beginning of that game, there's really no counter. You can't say, "Oh, we about to start playing man coverage and start locking up and start sending pressure." No, it doesn't work like that. You got to start aggressive, and then if you get punched, you start to switch some things up a little bit, start disguising some coverages and try to get a little exotic. But yeah, I think Blake Gideon, I didn't like the way he went into this game with this game plan, and I think that ultimately was one of the reasons why they did not have a good showing.
Yeah, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here, Jarvis, and letting the people know in this first episode, like, I was a band kid growing up, so I was like that version of a nerd.
Okay.
And I remember my band director in high school talking about, hey, like when you're playing your part, play it out loud. Even if you're not confident about what you're doing, playing it so that I can hear when you play something wrong and I can correct it. And I feel like, from a game plan strategy, I think about that type of thing in a very similar way of if you're aggressive to start off and you make mistakes and you have, a corner try to jump a route because he sees something and then, ball's going over his head. Okay, we can go on the sidelines and we can have a conversation and there can be some type of work of what did you see versus what ultimately played out. We can correct those things.
Right.
And I feel like you talked about that soft coverage that Gideon clearly, wanted to go with because of all of those, things kind of going on behind the scenes and deciding to play that soft coverage. You ultimately were letting them just kind of dink and dunk you down the field. And then the thing is, CJ Bailey still took the deep shots.
That's the thing.
Brent Key talks about limiting explosive plays. Okay, so limiting those plays of 15 yards or more. There were 8 passing plays of 15 yards or more. There were 4 rushing plays in this game of 15 yards or more. So you gave up the dink and dunk, and then you still gave up, a guy like Teddy Hoffman taking a 55-yard pass. You had Anderson who went for 51 on a pass. Like Bailey was still able to sling the ball deep with you giving up, the chunk plays along the way. And so Jarvis, I look at third down a lot of the times when it comes to how
it's a great indicator.
how defenses are handling themselves. And NC State went 7 of 11 on third down against Georgia Tech. They also averaged 8.7 yards per play. Like
Caleb, let me add this. They punted twice, and one of those punts was late in the game when the game was
when it
way out of hand.
Yeah,
it didn't matter.
Yeah,
twice.
Yeah,
twice. I don't understand that. It's so hard for me to grasp just giving it up like that, man. Like you just gave it up. And for me, I can just kind of understand. I can understand like players just feeling it, like really feeling their loss. Because when you look at Clayton Powell-Lee after the game, you could just feel it and hear it in his voice, man. He was just done. He was just like, man, they just executed. They just executed, man. And when you think about it, and this is the worst type of loss that you could have because you're going into a bye week because you can't. Oh yeah, we're gonna rinse this one out. We're gonna get them next week, and we're gonna put some stuff on tape that that we're proud of. You got to sit on this bad boy. You got to sit on it, and I can imagine when these guys get back together at some point during the week, they're going to trying to figure it out. They're going to be trying to lift 315 for reps of 20. Like they're going to be trying to figure it. They're going to be trying to get this one off of them because this was nasty, man. And I think that CJ Bailey really showed folks why Dave Doeren probably gonna keep his job because if
Yeah.
this kid can continue to play like this on a consistent basis, they can find a way for him to continue to play like this on a consistent basis. Man, he gonna stick around for a little while.
Well, Jarvis, this is the same Dave Doran who this past week before the Georgia Tech game said, I didn't like my football team last year. Like they were no fun to be on. He like literally said that in public on the
Wow.
record where
Yeah.
it came across my Twitter feed and I'm just kind of scrolling and I said, I'm sorry, sir said what? He said, I didn't like my football team. It was
Right.
like, oh, they were a bunch of, guys who didn't care about the team. And like he went in on them. And I was like, yeah, this sounds like a guy, there's another coach in this conference right now that wears orange, who I feel like has started saying some things lately that and had a freak out on the sideline over the weekend that makes you think maybe this guy isn't meant for the long run, being a Tiger. But so for Dorn to have that happen leading up to this game, knowing what happened a year ago in this game, because that was like, I think that was part of it too, is I'm watching this game going, heading into that bye, you've got so much to just sit on and think about versus a year ago for NC State, you lose this game because your kicker couldn't make a 58-yard field goal,
Right.
And you just go, all right, kickers, especially in
Yeah.
college. You are frustrated with the end result, but you kind of deal with it because it was close. Like this one, not close. And you were expected to be the better team. And so to have all of these things kind of hit you all at the same time really kind of shows, this is going to be certainly one that I'm interested to see how they respond, because you've got a whole lot of time to be able to sit on it, think about it, break down film. And Jarvis, you either get better from this or you let it simmer and build and you get frustrated and it blows up, and then when a team like Boston College comes around, how are you going to be able to handle all that type of situation? All right. Before we wrap up the show, got one more segment that we definitely want to get into, which is this AP poll, man. Where did the Yellow Jackets fall after what was a very, very disappointing loss? The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to the fourth quarter comebacks, all of those sorts of things. You can combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, every part of the game exciting, and especially when it's your team that you're wanting to bet on, it makes it more exciting for that late push, as they try to go for the win. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when you get your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Georgia Tech did not fare particularly well in the latest AP poll. And in fact, the last AP poll that we're going to care about, because we'll find out later this week. We'll get the college football rankings. They'll all meet in their secret ceremonial room, and maybe the white smoke will come out, and we'll
eat some filet mignon,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of a new pope, we'll get some new college football playoff rankings coming later this week, and so we'll have a show about that later this week as well. But in the latest AP poll, this kind of shows what everyone thinks of Georgia Tech, and they had them up there, and I think very much disrespected, because when you have an undefeated team in a Power 4 conference below other Power 4 teams who have losses, it's like, come on, what are we doing here? But to see Georgia Tech, go from 8th to 16th Jarvis, with one loss. I mean, do you look up there and see anyone that you're like, well, I think Georgia Tech should be ahead of them, or is this kind of fair of where they've fallen?
Man, it's not fair at all. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, man, I think back to early on in the year, there was a certain team that was 0-2. And for some strange reason, they were still
Still up
ranked.
there.
You know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about that other school that act like they want to be in the ACC, but they trying to get to the Big Ten. Notre Dame. Yeah, I'm talking to
Yeah.
y'all. I'm talking to y'all.
Right.
I'm talking to y'all. There's no way those guys should be above Georgia Tech, because at the end of the day, you gave Notre Dame the benefit of the doubt because you thought they were going to be a good team. They were bringing most of their guys back. And, you know, only guy they had changed up was the quarterback, right? But they didn't show that in those first 2 games. I know there was some pretty good doggone teams that they lost to, but they still were over. They lost. So why not a team that plays, and Notre Dame plays a mostly ACC schedule, right? They play ACC teams.
Yeah.
And the team that was undefeated in that said conference that they play certain games in, a certain amount of games in, somehow, because they won 6 straight, they are above
Right.
them.
Well, and it's like,
I don't make it make sense.
well, Jarvis, for me, it's the Miami loss. It's the Miami loss where it's like, okay, now we know what we think of Miami. It doesn't matter that the preseason rankings had Miami up at the top because, you know, they had Carson Beck, and Miami got to deal with, you know, this version of Carson Beck that, you know,
That's
team
the
across
version
the
that
way.
we all know here in the metro area.
Exactly. But it's like, okay, if we now know that Miami not a good team, and Notre Dame lost to them, that has to come into the, you know, and into the whole equation, the conversation of the now. And it can't be, well, they lost to the then, I think Miami was like 10th or something like that at that point. It's just like, no, we need to deal with the now. And I think this is why, Jarvis, obviously, like the AP poll, you don't put a whole lot of weight in this thing anymore, quite honestly. Especially
So much
when
bias.
Yeah, well, when you had that girl who I think gets a vote for USC, and she was like, "Oh, like this is," she works in news somewhere out there. Was like, "Oh, like this is fun," you know, kind of thing. And she was just going through, and I don't know if she was picking based on her favorite color or you know, her favorite mascot or what, but her rankings were like all out of sorts. It looked really bad. And then you kind of start to understand, oh, who is voting in this whole AP poll? I know we've got some people, you know, locally that I respect for sure. I know a guy like Zach Klein at Channel 2 is one of those people. But it's not necessarily the most strenuous options of how you end up with these people who are voting for the AP poll. And I think that's how you end up with a lot of big brand bias and a lot of going with who we've been told in the offseason is good until they show us otherwise. And I, you know, obviously like a team like Georgia Tech gets, I think, punished because they had, this is a bad loss. There's no way around it. Losing to NC State is a bad loss.
Sure.
But I think, you know, dropping down to 16th when you're looking at the teams like the Texases, like the Notre Dames, you know, who have multiple losses, I think, you know, Vanderbilt amongst that as well. Like it's gotta count for something. And I just feel like it's been pretty inconsistent on how they've done all this.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part because, you know, the SEC bias is there, you know, that is there because for at the beginning of the year, for the month of September, people were questioning whether or not Arch Manning was a starting quarterback for a powerhouse high school. You know, like the people were having these crazy conversations like, oh my God, he's awful. We understand why his granddaddy saying he was going to stay in school. Yeah, he is off. This dude is terrible. How is he talking about him going to the NFL? All of this going on, but he's finally started to settle in and play better. But that don't mean they're supposed to be where they are in these rankings. So I'll be very interested to see once the college ball playoff rankings, how they're going to ding them, because we know AP was like, oh, you drop these guys down to the bottom rung of the doggone of the top 25. Okay, let's see where they fall in the college football playoff rankings. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the week, so y'all make sure y'all definitely check that out. Because we're going to have some fun on this show.
Absolutely. Look, guys, thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and Alex Denoa break down the most interesting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. Tomorrow, we'll get in more of the offensive issues that were, a big reason why this loss to NC State ultimately happened. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcast for free. Follow the show on social media at Locked On Georgia Tech, as well as Jarvis and I, Jarvis D90. I'm at ATL Johnson 18. That'll do it for this episode. Look, this has been fun. Locked On Georgia Tech, your first listen of the day. We'll talk soon.